Morning.
Morning, how's it?
Good and you.
Lekker man. It's Wednesday.
Yes.
And the W in Wednesday is the same as the W in Wifey. So it's time we start doing something about her project, the Renobug, before I end up sleeping in a doghouse, my man.
We don't want that.
So the plan for today is to actually shorten this floor pan. Like we discovered in a previous video, we had to shorten it by, what was it?
What? No, I can't remember.
You can't remember, we wrote it on the board, it was 290 millimeters.
There we go. Okay.
So we got to shorten it, and we also discovered, I'll show you later, that we need to shorten a little bit in the front to get the pedal positions in the correct place, and then we'll do the rest in the back somewhere.
That's it.
So in a previous video we learned that we want the pedal, position of the pedal assembly in relation to the front axle further forward. If we leave it as it is, the pedal sits too far back in the car. We don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out about 100 mil or 4 inches right here so that we can move this back and connect this point to that point, which will then put my pedal assembly closer to my front axle, and then hopefully it will all work out much better. So yes, the first plan of action is to cut it off right here. Let's see how that goes. So I'm going to take out this section here in between these two seams. Now these seams are not parallel to each other, as you can see there. So I'm just going to scribe myself a mark here that I can cut on, or a line rather. And I think I will just use some masking tape so that I can see that line better. Something like that. So this distance that we're going to be cutting out will be that much, which is actually, let me see, 87 millimeters, whatever that is in inches. So that's how much we're going to cut out so that we can move it, this front part, closer to that pedal assembly. So before cutting it off completely, I'm just creating some reference marks here, that I've got something to work to. What have I done?
Oops.
Oops. Right, so with this piece out of the picture, I just tacked on a piece of flat bar here on the bottom to give me a helping hand for checking things out. So shall we call it the frame head or the pan head, is going to end up something like this. But now we've got another little challenge, because our master cylinder is actually catching right here So it's not going to work the way it's currently sitting. I think I'm just going to bolt this into place so we can see what's going to happen. Yeah, you see, that's as far back as I can go. And then it catches right here. So I'm going to have to make some sort of a indentation or something right in this area here. Huh. Well, I better do some surgery. I'm going to cut all this away and then we see what we get. A big hole. Okay, let's see. Yeah, it's close. I'm going to leave a little bit more clearance right here for that brake pipe. And yeah, I think I'll be able to get the wires on for the brake switch. I got a piece of 1/8 plate, 3mm thick, that I've shaped up a little bit. So that, got it the wrong way around. That is going to go in something like this. And I weld it in like that, and then I'll fill in that bottom piece as well. Now my bottom piece can go in like this, and then I can weld up the whole business and probably grind it a little bit just to make it look pretty. Like that, man. Anyone think this is not strong enough? I've got no concerns about that. With all this curve and everything else, it's probably stronger than what it was before, I reckon. Yes, we got clearance for the brake pipe here. That's cool. I got clearance enough here for my wires for the brake switch. Yeah, we're making progress. Now we're going to start thinking about attaching this thing. So this is the piece I removed, and I've cut this section out of it that I want to use because I want to stick it in here for some extra support. So I think I'm going to drill a couple of holes along here and plug weld it, and then I will drill some holes here in this one as well. Can slide over it, can plug weld that as well, and then of course I can do my final weld. Right, so I've got this clamped in place. Now I can just do my plug welds through the holes I drilled. You know, this hack job here that I inherited is now irritating me so much. I think I'm going to fix that before I do anything further. Just look at it, it's a right royal mess, man. I mean, some half-baked mechanic somewhere in the past of this poor thing needed to obviously replace that clutch cable. And I just hacked this open. I mean, what a freaking mess. So I edged this opening all around with some flat bar so I could get some meat for tapping these holes that I drilled. And then I made this little cover plate that will now go on like this. Here we go, man, that's a whole lot better. Now we've got an inspection cover that we can remove if we ever wanted to mess around with that clutch cable in there. And we've added some additional strength back into this tunnel section here. Right, so now that my irritation is out of the way, let's get this frame head on here so we can see what we need to do next. Just going to support it here with this jack for a bit to evaluate things. Now we got to think about how to get this thing center and square and parallel to the back. I mean, it's got all this movement. So I think I've got no issue with it being center. I mean, it fits over that support plate I welded in nicely, and it's lining up on the reference marks I made. So it's center. So I think what I'm going to do is just to give it a single tack right there, and then we can still move it this way and this way a little bit if need be, and then find a way to ensure that this is parallel to the back. So I left a gap here of about 2-3 millimeters, roughly 1/8 of an inch, so that I can get some good weld penetration. And I've now just made a single tack right here in the middle on top. So let's just consider a few things. Number one here, if I ensure that my gap here where I made the cut is equal right through, this should be okay. But even if it was out here by a degree or two, doesn't really make much of a difference to everything else, so I'm not too stressed about that. But having this, if I can hold it like that, having this parallel to that back suspension tube in all dimensions That's important in my mind. So we could spend time and money and a bit build an elaborate frame jig, but I don't feel it's worth it, especially if you're only going to be doing one of these. So I'm going to apply some common sense forest engineering methods to get all this sorted out. I found this piece of pipe that fits nicely into that hollowed out part where the front suspension bolts in. So I'm just going to tack that on quickly. Right, that should keep it. Because now I'm basically creating something that I can reference with. So now I'm going to measure the distance between this tube and my torsion bar tube here on the back on both sides and get them to be the same. I'm not even going to use a ruler or a tape measure rather. I'm going to use these two pieces of aluminum angle bar. And then I can just basically slide this out until it touches and then stick a little clamp on there. Like that. So in essence I'm creating a memory stick. So I've got my distance on this side, it's just touching there. And now we can check it on this side to see if it's the same or if there's a difference. Okay, it's a little bit more. And I've got the single tack in the middle here, so I can adjust this a little bit. It should move. Let's check it again. Right. And this side. Yes, I think we are pretty much there. Okay, so my distance between the tube here and there is the same on both sides. I'm going to give it a very light tack here on the one side and then on the other side double check it, and if all is good I can start welding it up. Hang on a minute, Duffy. Before you start welding like mad, you must also check that this tube and the back tube, looking from the front, is parallel to each other. Let's put an angle bar finder here on this back tube. Okay, that's 0. Now let's go put it on that front tube and see what we get. Okay, let's see. Let's stick it on here. How about that, eh? 0 as well. Can't get any better than that. I'm impressed. So I can weld it together. So if we look at it from dead ahead, this tube is parallel to the back tube. And if we look at it from above, the distance on that side between the front tube and the back tube is the same as on this side. So all is good in the land. Somewhere in the future, the little Renobug will be able to go down a straight line. Okay, so I have now taken out the piece right here. So the pan is already shorter. But I also need to take another piece out of here to shorten it even more. Let's go do some calculations so you see what I'm talking about. So in a previous video, Wayne and myself measured the wheelbases of the Renault and the Beetle. And we calculated that we need to shorten the pan by 290 mm. The piece I've already taken out, that is shortened it by 85 mm. Yes, I cut at 87, but I did allow a bit of a gap for the welding, so let's call it 85. So if we subtract this from each other, we get a distance of 205 millimeters. That more than 8 inches that we need to not take out here in the back. Let's just call it 210 millimeters. So I'm going to cut out my 210 millimeter piece right here behind this handbrake bracket. Oh yeah, here in South Africa we call an e-brake a handbrake. So I've made this cardboard template. So that will be the piece that I want to remove. And yeah, I know most guys would just do a straight cut and have a butt weld. I've decided to do a bit of a Z. It will just help me to line it up nicely and make it a little bit stronger, I think. So I've just added some tape here so that I can draw a line on the tape so that my old eyes can see a little bit better. Now in this area here, especially here, you got to cut really careful. That mustn't cut very deep because those e-brake pipes sits very close to the top here. So you got to be really careful. If you cut too deep, you're going to cut them off. I don't want that. Okay, here goes. So I need to loosen up this here clutch cable tube and accelerator cable tube before I can actually shorten the pan. So I think I'm just going to remove this plate here to make my access easier. I don't need this anymore. Yes, now I've got good access. Someone has already messed here before. Look at this blob of welding here. So I'm just going to cut this loose now. And then my pipes are loose, or tubes. And then it can slide backwards. So I left this bottom piece in place so we can keep the whole thing together for a while longer while we check out all these pipes. So let's go through them. These two here are for the heater controls. Same with those two there. And this smaller one here, that's accelerator cable. The thicker one there, clutch cable. And these two are your e-brakes, or hand brakes as we say. So I'm not going to need the heater controls, so I'm just going to cut these out. I'm going to have to cut the e-brake pipes and make them shorter. And then of course my accelerator and clutch pipes, they can slide out through the back because remember I've already loosened it in the back. So they are now movable. So the one set of heater tubes exited by this hole right here, and I could just wiggle it around and break that tack, and then I could pull them out. The other two are just kind of floating around in here at the moment. They exit right here. So now I'm thinking I actually would like to get them out because I don't want them to rattle around in there. So I'm going to have to grind off this weld here, and then hopefully I'll be able to pull them out. Yeah, shit, this plan's not going to work. It's attached in another spot that I didn't know about. Let me show you. I mean, you can't even see it, but right in here I can feel it. Right underneath the torsion bar tube there's a little bracket that's holding it on as well. Now there's no way I can get in there to take that off unless I cut a hole in the bottom. I don't want to do that. So I think I'm just going to tack this back into place and then make a little plate and cover all of it so that the water can't go in there. Well, I'm not that desperate to get this tube out of here. I just don't want it to float around. So here's plan B now. I'm going to try, you see that hole, that's where the other heater tube came out. I'm going to try and tack that tube through that hole, and then it will secure it in place. If you look carefully into that hole, you can see I can move my pipe until it sits right there behind the hole. So I'm just going to tack it through this hole and then weld it up, and then at least my pipe is secure and it won't flop around. Whatever it takes, man. Hole? What hole? And now my heater pipe is secure. Can't rattle around anymore. Just cut off this last bit here. And yes, I'm paying with blood. And I got my piece of plate welded on here to cover up that little hole for what it's worth. Right, so let's recap and contemplate our next move. So my heater control tubes are gone. I'm only left here with my clutch cable tube and my accelerator cable tube. Now I have disconnected them in the back, so they are loose. As you can see, they move. So when this moves forward, that will just slide back. And then I've also cut out my e-brake or handbrake cable tubes. Now I do want to use it, so I actually need to reconnect this tube right there. And the only way I can figure to actually weld it on there, because once this is moved and touches there, I can't access this anymore. So I'm going to cut this open here so I can have access. But I want to do this for another reason as well. This distance across from corner to corner is more than the distance across here. So when I cut this open, I can bend this out a little bit on both sides to hopefully match up with that corner there and there. Look there, if you look carefully you can see I just nicked that tube. It'll still be okay, but like I said, you got to be really careful when you cut across here, because that tube is very close to the surface. So the last thing I want to do before we finally cut this thing into two pieces, I'm going to add these doubler plates or fish plates, whatever you want to call them. Here from the inside I'm going to plug weld them through those holes. And then once I've moved them together, I can do the same on that side. So they will help me to line it up and of course give me some additional strength. Okay, so I've bolted on the front suspension again because I'm going to need some wheels now for my next move. So let me explain my plan to you and then we're going to see how it's going to work. So I've got this back part supported on 4 jack stands. So the idea is that it can't move. And the front part is now sitting on the drums from the front suspension, and it's also supported by a small little jack here. So once I've cut it off, hopefully I can just roll it and slide it, bring it back so that we can connect these two pieces once I've removed this section. So yeah, let's see how that works out. So I can't cut it from the top with a grinder because my tubes are in the way, and I'm not at all comfortable with cutting it from the bottom. I mean, that's awkward, and there is the possibility that it might pinch. So I'm actually just rather going to use the plasma cutter and give it a rough cut, and then we can take it from there. Now it should be loose. There's one tiny spot that's still catching. There we go. It's awkward to get in here. Well, now that it's apart, I think I might as well just turn this upside down. That will just make it easier to cut. Well, I should be able to roll this front section forward. Let's find out. Haha, my plan is working well. Except it wants to climb off the jack here now. Right, a little bit more. I'm just going to turn this thing upside down now so I can do a nice cut there. Okay. Like this. There we go. Now I can cut this nicely. Well, that's as far as I can go now. I'm catching here because this is narrower than this. So I need to bend my two little doubler plates in a little bit. Open this a little bit so it can slip over. But the other thing I also still have to do is I've got to shorten my e-brake pipes here. This distance here is way less than this. And that needs to be at least the same as that. So I think I'm going to cut them shorter first, so that they're right. And then we can mess around with pulling this in a little bit. I think I might just stick a clamp on here. Do this. Yeah, that's going to work. It's already coming to a point where it can slide over now. But let me just cut this quickly. So this distance is 73. So from here, I must cut it at least at 73. I'm going to make it a little bit more and go to 75. Cut it off here. And then I've got a plan to make a little sleeve as well. I'll show you now what I'm going to try. Yeah, so easy to move that front section around, so I just rolled it forward again so that I can get in here easier to cut these pipes. Not really getting in enough now. Let me try something else. Move this up a little bit. There we go. And while I've got this access, let me just knock these pieces out a little bit as well. Okie dokie. Let's try again. Let's bring this thing back into place. Let's guide my two tubes through the back there. Right, a little bit more come. Still fouling a little bit. I'm going to put a clamp on here. Let's pull this in a little bit. Okay, so now I've got it drop down a little bit. Too much. Maybe now. It's in. Let's get the clamp out of the way. There we go. Now I must just mess around with it and line it up. So we're looking pretty good here. But I don't know, something went wrong here. This gap wasn't supposed to be so big. I think my tape measure must have lied to me again. But it doesn't matter because I'm planning to sleeve it with this bit of tubing that will slide over. So that's not a worry. I would need to bend this a little bit though and get it lined up better. So I found a bit of tubing that's a nice sliding fit. So I could slip that on. And now I can just slide that over like this. Do the same with this one. So that will help me to line these e-brake tubes. Get this one on here. Come on. It's being difficult now with me. There we go. So that lines it up nicely. I can just give it a tack there and there. Same this side, and then we sort it. That will be good. So to start lining up my back half and front half, I've just clamped on this little bit of flat bar here to line up these two flanges, and I gave it a light tack just here on the one side. Now before I weld it together, I'm just going to do a few checks to ensure that my front suspension beam is parallel and sorted and sitting correctly in relation to my torsion bar tube in the back. So I'm going to use my adjustable memory stick again and check that the distance between this tube in the back and that front beam is the same on each side. So I wiggle things around a little bit until I got these two dimensions to be the same. It's checking out, it's looking good. And the next thing I want to do is the good old triangulation trick. There's a threaded hole right here, so I'm just going to screw in this stud here. If I can get it to line up. There we go. So that's going to be my one reference point, and since I don't have anybody to hold the tape for me, I've just made this little wire hook that I've put onto the end of my tape measure. So now I can hook it over like that. That'll just make my life much easier. And do the same on the other side as well. I'm going to use this point on the front beam here as my other reference. So now I can pull my tape across. And I'm going to read a dimension right here. 1965 millimeters to that edge. So I've measured that diagonal at 1965. So let's measure this one. see what we get. Let me see, 196, almost 4. So that would be a difference of, let's say 2 millimeters. I think that's good enough. I'm really not going to worry about a 2 mil difference. So with my two diagonal dimensions practically the same, I mean, they're within less than 2 millimeters of each other, so I'm not going to cry about that. This now means that my front suspension is parallel to this back tube in the view from above. There's one more thing I want to check, and then I'm going to weld this thing together. Let's stick the angle finder on this back tube. Let's zero it. Now let's put it here on the front suspension tube and see what we get. Hey, how about that? Zero as well. Awesome. So that means that the front suspension tube and that back tube is also parallel to each other when we view it from dead ahead, like this. So with all those checks in place, we can now weld this thing together. I've already given it a light tack here, just to make sure things don't move anymore. So I've got a light tack here, same on that side. I'm going to start giving it a couple more tacks and then weld it together. I've got a good couple of tacks in place, including my one plug weld already. And I jump from side to side so that I get even distribution of heat. It ain't going anywhere now, man. I've got some good tacks in place here on the sleeves for my e-brake tubes or handbrake tubes. So now I can stick this plate in as well. Yes, this piece that I cut out here. Let's see. Doesn't fit so well anymore because of this change in geometry here. So I'm going to cut a new piece that I can weld in here. There we go. I just tacked on a piece of flat bar to give me a helping hand with lining it up. So now I can weld this in place as well. Okay, so all my welding is done, and I'm thinking now, I've got good weld penetration, I've got that interior or inside doubler plate, so I think I'm going to spend some time with the weld blender and try to make this look like it never happened. Some paint and you'll never know that this happened. Looks factory to me now. One more thing left to do, and that's to shorten these tubes. So my mate Bugger reckons that this pipe here for the clutch cable, you need to cut that at the same position where it was before. Apparently that flexible sleeve that slips over here that goes on to the transmission needs to have a bit of a bend in it, and if you don't have that, your clutch might shudder. So who am I to argue? I'm going to cut it off here where it used to stop. The one for the accelerator cable, well, that's not that critical, but it's a little long, so I'll cut it shorter as well. I've made this little plate to fill in there. And then I can weld my tube needs to go in like that. And then I can weld that into place. Okay, lekker man, so my two tubes are shortened and welded back into place, so that's all good. And this plate that I welded on here, what's the story here? Well, I didn't say this, but underneath it is the original Beetle chassis number, and I wanted to make that disappear because I actually have the papers for the Renault. So let's not confuse the issue here with a Beetle chassis number. So now it's just gone. Well then, I think my work is done here. I still got to do this bottom weld, but I'm not going to try and fight with that now and work upside down. So I'll do that the next time I get the opportunity to turn this thing upside down, and then I'll probably fit a double plate down there as well. So there we have it, man. One by shortened and highly modified VW Beetle floor pan. So I think in the next round I'm going to get some wheels on here. We'll stick the transmission back into place, put the back wheels on, and then we can hoist this body onto the floor pan here and see what we need to do to conclude this marriage between the Beetle and the Renault. Thanks for hanging out with me out here in the shop. I enjoyed it. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, have a lekker one, man.